Well, we'd like to welcome Shayana and Azutanya Dean this evening. It is a really momentous and awesome occasion here in Canada to get them up here and bring this wonderful information to us and teaching. We have, had a little bit of a manifesting group that to get Anna up here. Shayana. And so... I knew I should have wrote something down.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming.
Yes, yes. And thank you, Monica.
She's trying to use a private session, I think. Well, I'm Azutanya, or Michael for short, and if you like it shorter, you call me Az, all right? I'm the lesser half of this duo, known as Speaker 2 in waiting. This is Speaker 1 arrived. I get to do just a little job of saying, in this situation, how totally amazed we're just blown away to see all you people here, and particularly to find such a wonderful warm reception. I think that we could say for each other and ourselves that we haven't been anywhere on the planet where we felt instantly open to and with people that have approached us and have welcomed us and have brought the organisation to the level it's been brought to for this event. You've done just an amazing job. We're so impressed with you guys, and one of the things that never gets talked about is how we get impressed by you people. It really happens a lot more. Anyway, the thank yous are not done because we'll continue doing that with you all the way through the weekend by way of presenting the work the best way that we know how. I don't really get to say much simply because I can't condense this in a way that does justice to the material. But what I want to say to you is that welcome to the Freedom Teachings, since that is what they are, of the Azurite Temple, Emerald Order. And what Ashana will do during the course of this weekend, and for those of you who decide to come to the round table classes the following weekend, is she will begin to introduce you to material which is pre-ancient, if you like, if you want to play the language of the spiritual movement. It's very, very old. It relates entirely to the principles of creation, the function of creation, our role in it, and so on. So you'll understand that since creation is pretty damned old, then this work also is as well. The last time it existed on the planet as a body of teaching was over 210,000 years ago. The last time it existed in book forms, elements of the whole, was about 2,000 years ago, in the time of the people that you refer to as Jesus, or Jeshua, or in terms of Voyager's material, Jeshua 12, John the Baptist, and Miriam. Some of these books existed then, and it's significant that they were during the time that the reorganization and planning of what we should be taught from a spiritual and religious perspective, that the Bible left all of this material out. Why? Because it is your heritage. And why? Because it is your key to personal spiritual power. Everything that we stand for and represent, without trusting anybody in any way, without asking anybody to believe it, or to do as we tell them because we don't, everything is about your freedom. Everything is about your right to express as a fully realized spiritual being. And in our language, as the angelic human, you were and still are, but you were created to be. As guardians of this planet, as guardians of this galaxy, and as major players in a very, very big game. Bigger than you realize now, and I hope as big as you will come to realize before the weekend's over. Anyway, that's my stuff. Here's the best stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Azutanya, very much for your flattery. Okay, I would like to, again, welcome all of you here, and thank you for coming to this workshop. This is an introductory workshop on Kathara Healing. It's Kathara Healing Level 1 and an introduction to Kathara Healing Level 2, which has recently been put into the program. I say introductory, and it's kind of funny. For anyone here who has looked through the manual for the Kathara manual, you will see that an introduction in our world is rather detailed. There's a lot of information that we're going to cover. Before we get into technicals, I would like to first of all thank Monica and everyone that has participated in bringing us up here. It is an honor for us to come up here and share this information with you. It wasn't an idea that we actually had time for this year because our schedule is very crazy, going all over internationally and teaching and doing planetary grid work. But a situation came up where one of the people who was teaching Kathara couldn't come here, and somebody had to come and bring the material to you because there were already people registered to come. So we were brought up here by Monica and the people who were working with her. And I would like to thank Monica and Cicely and Alexis and whoever else has helped to bring us here, because it is an honor. I've always wanted to come to Canada to bring the teachings. Since I was a child, I visited once in the Ontario region, and I always liked it here. I just felt the energy. I resonated with it in a way I couldn't understand. So this was a place that I always wanted to be able to come to bring these teachings, and now we're here. So I'd just like to thank everybody, and I hope everybody can appreciate the effort of those people who organized this, because they did most of the work of putting it together, just like we've done most of the work of putting the program together. Now, the program that we're going to spend the next, this evening and 2 days exploring is called Kathara. Excuse me. The Kathara Biospiritual Healing System. Now, this is a healing program that is built on what is called divine blueprint science. This is an ancient science that is more advanced in its way than what is called science in our world today. Yet it is completely translatable into what we call science today. What is most important about the biospiritual healing system that's called Kathara is that it gives us an opportunity to begin to understand the reality of what we are made of. Most of us have some idea that we have a physical body, obviously. We have a mental body of some sort, a mind that is aware of having a physical body. And most of us hope, at least, that we have a spiritual body, whatever that might be, because that's our connection to something larger than here, bigger than here, that gives us purpose and reason. Some people call it God, some people call it spirit, some people don't call it anything, but they sense that living life force that they're a part of, whether or not they have a body. Now, not everybody realizes that the body is just a very tiny part of the anatomy of the human being. It's only a very tiny part of the anatomy of matter. We're in a system that we have our bodies here, but we're also in a world that appears to be three-dimensionally solid. It appears to be made of particles, and our scientists tell us about quarks and all sorts of little subatomic particles, protons, electrons, all those things. So there's obviously a thing called matter that's out here. But behind this thing called matter, both the matter that our bodies are made of and the matter that the planet is made of, there is much more of an anatomy of energy structure. There's a structure called the Kathara grid. There is a structure of many layers of the Kathara grid that bring us up to the point where what is not manifest becomes manifest as matter. The power of the human being, the power of the human being as a spiritual creation, exists in those realms of anatomy that are beyond what we see in the three-dimensional form. Those are the areas of our anatomy that literally direct what our physical bodies will do. They direct our birth process, our aging process, our growth process. They direct whether we will be healthy or sick. If we don't understand the anatomy that exists behind our matter, we are going to be at the mercy of that matter. If our body gets old, we're not going to know what to do to change that, to stop it, or to fix it. If our body gets sick, we're going to try to fix it from the outside in. But if there's something wrong in the templates beneath the matter, we're not going to be able to create a permanent fix or a permanent healing. Kathara healing takes us into the core template of matter. It takes us not only into the levels of healing or holistic healing that are identified in things like Chinese acupuncture, which deal with meridian lines in the body, with Reiki systems of healing, which deal with the subtle energy bodies and chakras and using symbol codes to work with them. Beneath all of those levels of your body anatomy, your subtle body anatomy, there is a core structure that governs what your chakras are going to do, what your meridian lines are going to do, and what your matter particles are going to do. What's fascinating about learning your anatomy, it's like we've been going through thousands of years thinking that we only had, let's say, one hand and one leg. And we've been trying to get along with that one hand and one leg, not realizing there was a whole other half of our body that if we learned how to use it, we would be able to walk and function much better. The other half of our body, their anatomy, that we have not been using in the last 25,000 years especially, has been the part called the Kathara grid. The subtle energy systems that get into the primal life force currents and how they come through the body template to manifest what we call our physical form. But they don't only manifest the physical form. And this is why we call Kathara a bio, referring to biology, spiritual healing system. Spirit, consciousness. The consciousness that makes you aware of who you are today, that helps you to remember who you were yesterday, who you were as a child, the part of you that allows you to visualize who you might like to become or where you might like to go in the future. This part of you that you call consciousness is your spirit. It's right here with you. It's not separate from you. The Kathara grid template that your body matter manifests on is also the template of energy that your consciousness manifests into dimensionality through. It's what gets you into your body. If there are template problems within the human body, which right now there are on a global scale, and there have been for 25,000 years, if there are problems in the template, there will not only be problems with the matter form, there will be problems with the consciousness as it tries to get into that matter form. Right now, the way things work in our system is when we are in spirit form, before we enter a process called fetal integration, where we as spirit, consciousness, come into a body vehicle to have an incarnation here, we have a problem with the body pattern here because of template distortions, which means as soon as the consciousness comes into the body and intertwines itself with the DNA template, with the gene code, the DNA template literally shuts off about 90% of the consciousness. The part that's left here grows. This is what becomes the person. You remember you as a baby being. It becomes the person that you grow to be here. But the rest of who you are, who you were when you came in, is who you still are, but you don't remember it because you can't bring the memory of yourself as a spirit directly in, because the body serves as a light switch. It's turning most of the current off, most of the current of your consciousness. Now, the current of your consciousness, if you had it fully embodied as a human being with a human template, you would have a minimum of 12 dimensions of consciousness, not just seeing a three-dimensional reality field, but you would be able to access and move your consciousness and your body through 12 dimensions of matter, which means different matter density levels. We were, once upon a time, a species that was immortal. Our bodies did not die. Death is not a natural condition for the human body form. However, we've been dying for a very long time on this planet. There's a reason why we've been dying on this planet, and that reason is a genetic mutation. It's a genetic mutation that has been rendered on the deepest core template level of the subtle bodies, the Kathara grid. And because of that, literally, the way our chromosome structures evolve, the way our gene code in chemical terms evolves, is not what it was intended to be. It is not functioning on its original divine blueprint. So we find ourselves trapped as consciousness in a mortal body form that has a very, very short lifespan that progressively deteriorates before our eyes. By the time we hit 35 years old, we start to feel it. We start to feel what's called the death hormone. It starts to kick in, and it starts to make you tired when 10 years ago the same thing didn't make you tired. The body literally starts to kill itself. It poisons itself with chemical toxins. Science here calls this normal. They call it the aging process. They tell us that we're supposed to accept the fact that birth, death, and paying taxes are about the only thing that's really certain in existence. Science here accepts death as what it's supposed to be like for a human form, because science here is based on a very small amount of partial knowledge, because the ancient knowledge was hidden from the races on this planet. It was hidden in order to make us easy to control, in order to keep us from remembering the rest of ourselves why we were here. Now, when we get into the Templar workshop, which will be next weekend, we'll get into the reasons, who did this, who done it, and why have we been, as a race, suffering for 25,000 years? Why, if we were immortal, why the heck have we been dying all these years? Why don't we remember who we are if we're somebody special? If we're something different than what we perceive as animals, and we actually have this huge amount of consciousness called spirit that has the answers to everything, is directly connected to God, why don't we know this? Why does it seem like something we wish for? Hope is there, but we have no evidence to really support. There are reasons why these things took place, and the reasons are huge. We're in the middle of a big, big drama right now on this planet. It's not a drama that started yesterday. It's a drama that started in a period of time that's known as the Atlantean period. Now, we hear legends of Atlantis coming up in our culture these days, and it's still a fictional place in terms of mainstream experts telling us what our past was. Mainstream experts base their interpretation of what they think our past was on records and bones that they found and guesses they've made as to what those might mean if you put them together in certain ways. Right now, our cultures are being fed through mainstream science. They're being fed partial facts and guesses as if they were absolute truth, as if they were proven, when in fact the assumptions that science frequently comes up with by looking at evidence but not having any idea of what to compare it to, we're being taught assumptions as core truths, and we're learning to accept that. We're learning to accept we came out of animals, probably apes, Darwinian theory, but now there's a little argument in the scientific community. No, maybe it wasn't out of apes, but rather something that swam in the waters once upon a time, and then we grew limbs and hands and things. Our flippers became limbs, and we walked up on land and became air breathers. And the real one, the Big Bang Theory, if you look at it, takes us right back to we started as pond scum. And somehow we managed to manifest ourselves in the water, then up on land, and here we are, the next generation of, must have been the progression through from pond scum to fish thing to ape thing into what we call human. If you look at the amount of stretch it takes in concepts to come up with that idea as your core truth, you can get some idea of what science is doing right now. There are reasons why science is doing what it's doing. Those reasons won't be identified in this particular course too much. It'll be in the next course, because that gets into something called Illuminati, which are a body of people on this planet that have been doing things with information for many thousands of years in order to control the large amounts of people in a negative way. We'll talk about Illuminati when we get into the Templar workshop, and we'll talk about a whole lot more. But in this workshop, we're going to talk about what's most important to you as a person first, before we deal with the big picture drama that we're all in the middle of right now. Because believe me, you'll want to know all this stuff before you find out what we're in the middle of right now, so it doesn't scare you to death. See, there's no reason to be afraid of the big picture drama if you already know the solutions. All right? So here, we're going to give you the solutions first. The solutions have to do with understanding what your body is, what your mind is, what your consciousness is, where your spirit's located, and how to get it the heck back into your body so you can start having a better life experience here. Kathara healing is the beginning process of learning how to do that, because we will learn literally the anatomy, the structure of our anatomy on 15 dimensions. Now, 15 dimensions. It's funny if you look at science again, they have all sorts of theories. There's unified field theory. There's quantum theory. Theory implies guess, because we don't know. All right? Now, this information that is being presented here, you will be shown the structure of 15-dimensional physics. You will be shown the structures that exist within those structures that allow us to create what's called the hologram of matter. This is not a theory. Now, scientists would love to argue with me, I'm sure. Well, how do you know it's not a theory? Everything is a theory. No, it isn't. Fortunately, there are levels of reality. There are beings in levels of reality that have not been involved with the distortions of consciousness and biology that have taken place on this planet, who have held the records, who have held the original creation records that literally detail the spiritualized science by which creation itself is brought into manifestation by a common source intelligence that many people choose to call God. It's not a God that sits on a big throne and has a white beard and stuff. It's a consciousness. We were created in the image of God. That doesn't mean we're all men. That was a man twist. Humans created that one. We were created in the image of God as consciousness, as spirit, as awareized energy. Now, we're going to learn about the structure of how we as awareized energy got ourselves into this predicament of being stuck in a mortal body. We're going to learn 15-dimensional structure, and I will teach this to you as an absolute, not as a theory. Now, you have the absolute free will choice to take anything I say and consider it a theory, a guess, or a belief, as opposed to something that is known. But in my life and in my world, these things are known. So I teach with a lot of conviction, because I'm not teaching you guesses. I'm teaching you what I've known and found to be true. Part of the reason that even though I was painfully shy all through my growing up stage, and I literally dropped out of college because I had a public speaking class as a requirement, and I got an A on my written speech, and it was my turn to go up and read it. And I couldn't deal with it because I was terrified of talking to people this way. I was used to telepathy, but not speaking. Now, what could possibly get somebody who's that painfully shy up doing what I'm doing, talking about absolutely radical theories of science and spirit in front of all sorts of audiences all over the world? You can't fake that one. It takes a lot of conviction. It takes a knowing and a desire to share a truth that has created a freedom in my life. A freedom that because I know these things, because I've been taught these things, and I have used the technologies, I have found levels of my own consciousness, got them back into body. I have learned to do things with my consciousness, and we're beginning to learn how to do them with our bodies, that are science fiction compared to what science tells you is possible. I know that these are the freedom teachings, and if I can at least get some of that across to each one of you, and each one of you will get a little piece that's all your own. It'll mean something different to every one of you, because every one of you came here for a different reason. There's a need that brought every one of you here, a core need that you might not even know on a conscious level, but there was some piece of information that you were looking for that would be your next step to grab hold of so you could start to make a difference and start to find your power again. Because what's happened on this planet to everybody is that we have lost our power. Right now, we walk around in a world that appears to inflict itself on us from the moment we take our first breath. We appear to be in a world that happens to us, not a world that we create. We appear to have all sorts of things coming at us constantly. That is a very real appearance when you're stuck here. But when we start to realize the framework of reality that is creating this, when we start to realize this is a hologram field. What's that? It's a thought form field. That means, theoretically, my thoughts should be able to influence it, right? Theoretically. Well, they do. If your DNA imprint was working the way it was designed to work by its divine blueprint, by the original blueprint that Source created humans to be, you would be able to literally manifest everything directly into matter with no problem at all. There are a lot of ascension teachings out there these days in the New Age movement. They will teach you it's all mind over matter. Just believe this or believe that, and poof, so it will be. Well, it's like there's a lot of poofs happening out there, but people are still sitting in their chairs. Nobody's demanifested yet. Nobody's been able to manifest a house like that right before them when they only have 2 pennies in their pocket. There's a lot of promises being made in the New Age movement with what we call partial and or false ascension teachings that are teaching you part of the mechanics of the way the mind is indeed supposed to be able to, as a spirit, create what it desires in matter. But what is not being taught is what is stopping that process from working functionally and effectively, where each one of us could not worry about life because we'd be able to manifest what we desire. We can use positive thinking. We can use affirmations. I am this now. I am whole now. I am demanifesting now. Still here. That is the beginning, learning to use the mental body more effectively. But if it were that simple, you would demanifest now once you gave the command. The reason the commands don't jump into immediate action in our 3D world is because there's a distortion taking place between our mind thought patterns and we as spirit desiring to do something, and the chemical realities in the body and the energy realities behind them. There are distortions taking place in the templates that are taking what our intention is and doing things to it, and it comes out to be something different in the hologram. Since 25,500 BC, there's been something wrong with the planetary grids in the way they're running frequency. There's been a problem in the electromagnetic fields on the planet, and that has created severe mutation in the DNA of all life forms on the planet. There was a time when life on Earth had what was called a variable base genetic code. That means the genetic alphabet, which are the chemical components of the DNA chains, were made out of a different amount of chemicals. A frog would have one amount of chemical combinations, a human would have another amount, a tree would have another amount. Right now, science was amazed to find, when they started to get into DNA, that everything appears to have what's called a base 4 genetic alphabet. That literally 4 chemicals that combined into different combinations are what make up the gene code of all things. So they assume that that's the way it is. They assume that's normal. That is not normal. This whole planet right now is under a base 4 genetic mutation called the checkerboard DNA mutation that is being caused because of a distortion in the electromagnetic fields on the planet. Now, when we get into Cathara in the next 2 days, we're going to learn how an electromagnetic field distortion on the planet could actually affect the DNA of life forms, how that could actually happen. Because we're going to learn about something called the Planetary Biofeed Interface System, which is the system by which primal life force currents come through from source through the universal matrix into the galactic matrix, into the planetary matrix, and into the bodies of everything on the planet. This is how we have our consciousness connection to primal energy, which is the primal consciousness and intelligence of source. These energies are supposed to flow in a very specific way. We get energy fed to us from the planet. This is how our spirit downloads into our body. It goes through the planetary grids and back into our fields. Because the planetary grids have been damaged, our Mother Earth Terra Gaia here, our planet, is ill. It has been ill since 25,500 BC, actually before that, but the real illness set in then. There has been this mutation that has existed in the gene code that has blocked out most of the DNA. It's done that by blocking out most of the DNA template. So we're going to learn about what a DNA template is as opposed to the chemical DNA. We're going to learn about the body systems, the interwoven subtle energy systems, like chakras and meridians and axiotonal lines and things called Huva bodies and Cathara grids and crystal seals that are all part of the regulatory system of the DNA template, all of which work together to create what manifests as the chemical DNA chains. The reason we are stuck here is because most of our DNA has been turned off. What science looks at now and calls junk DNA, which are sequences of DNA that appear to not produce proteins. They appear to be dormant and don't do anything. They just sit there in the DNA chains. They didn't always sit there. Once upon a time, they were filled with things that created chemicals, created proteins, created building blocks for life. As we work with Cathara, we will be able to trace where the distortions are, and we don't need a laboratory to begin the process of reverse mutation. Reverse mutation of the genome, the human genome, which means bringing it back to its original base 12 potential. Base 12 means there were 12 chemical components that made up the DNA chains on a physical level. It meant there were 12 strand templates on the subtle body levels. That when it works right, they come into manifestation, manifest the chemicals, and with those chemicals we are able to hold 12 dimensions of consciousness, which is the consciousness of what is known as an avatar. We were all born to be avatars. We were born to be, some of us, ascended masters. We'll talk a little bit in this course about indigo children. That's a buzzword in the New Age movement now. Indigo children, they're special, they're something. What are they? We'll talk a little bit about that, because they're a human form, but they have a DNA template that goes beyond 12 strands. They have from 24 to 48 strand potential, because they came here as part of a rescue mission. They're a species, a Lyran-Sirian species of human consciousness that came to help reset the templates of the DNA here on this planet. Most people that are drawn to this work are indigo children, but they don't know it. Indigos don't know they're indigos till they wake up. Humans don't know they're supposed to be angelic until they wake up. So we're all stuck down here wondering, what do I do with myself next? If you look at life in the three-dimensional term, and you look at the options our societies give us, it can be really, really depressing. Because you get to the point where, okay, you work all this time, you work really, really, really hard, so you can make, what, money. So why? So you can have a roof over your head and maybe a nice life. And by the time you make enough money to get that roof over your head and have a nice life, most of the time you've run so much energy through your body and exhausted yourself so much that your body falls apart. So you get to sit in a nice house and call the doctor. And then what you want more than anything, and you're even willing to give up your nice house to have it, is your health back. It's almost like if God made it this way on purpose, he had a very strange sense of humor. Slightly masochistic, slightly sadistic. God is not a sadist. What we are living here was not the intended divine blueprint of this planetary system. What is happening here has hung us up in an evolutionary time warp where we're actually de-evolving instead of moving forward in our evolution back into the full avatar expression that we were created to be. It's not just us that's being affected, not just humans are being affected by this particular genetic mutation. Every life form on this planet, because every life form is connected to the planetary grids, is suffering right now. Animals are trapped in a very unnatural relationship where they have to energy vampire off each other, which means they have to kill each other in order to simply sustain. That's where you get your food chain. That's not natural either. It is natural on planets that are not able to run the higher frequency currents or the primal life force currents. If this planet were running the full spectrum of 15-dimensional currents, and particularly the first 12 of those 15, it would be very different here. Lions and lambs would lay down with each other. Humans would not kill each other. It would be the type of reality that our holy books have promised us exists, a reality that is very heavenly indeed. The beginning of returning the potentials of having a heaven on earth starts with each person, because human beings were created as an angelic species that was appointed as the guardians of this planet. We were supposed to help the other life forms on this planet to evolve into their full expression of their divine blueprints. We were supposed to be loving keepers of the planetary Templar complex, which is something we'll talk about next weekend that has to do with stargates. Somewhere along the line, we got in trouble. And right now, we are functioning with the animals, with the plants, in a way that's completely not organic for our consciousness. There is a pain that every one of us carries. It is a soul pain, a very deep soul pain, that knows something vital has been robbed from us. Some of us turn that pain into anger. Some people are born angry. They carry that feeling, that knowing, that they have been somehow victimized. Now, there is a victimization taking place here, but there is a point of consciousness that happens to exist in the higher dimensional fields where you start to understand the victim-victimizer game and you don't get trapped in it anymore. But when you have your consciousness shut off at D3 and somebody tells you, well, victim-victimizer is just a game, you don't have to play it, it doesn't seem quite real. Nice concept, but it doesn't change the fact that I feel awful, you know? And great, okay, the New Age movement, you're manifesting this. Okay, I take responsibility, I'm manifesting this. How do I stop manifesting this? How do I get control over my life so I can live in a way that is peaceful and loving and joyful? So I feel that I am at one with Source. So I have a loving relationship with God and with other things. How do I bring that potential back? The beginning of that is bringing back the consciousness, the part of your consciousness that right now holds that knowledge in a higher dimensional field. The way you can bring that consciousness back in is to open up the conduits in the subtle body that will open up the chemicals in the DNA body that will allow those frequencies of consciousness to come into your mind and your body here, so you can have access to your higher consciousness. This is why Kathara is not only a system that will begin the process of healing the physical body, it is a spiritual healing system in the greatest sense of the word. It is a healing system that will begin the process of bringing you as an avatar consciousness literally back into focus here, where you don't have to feel trapped anymore. You don't have to feel like you have to resign yourself to the fact that death and illness and taxes are the only thing that life is about down here. One of the things that when you begin to realize what you really are, before you realize who you are, you need to realize what you are. You're in a human form. What is that? What does it mean? Once you know that, you start to realize something. There's a big lie that's been told here for a long time. Be afraid of death. We're taught to be scared of dying, as if we, who we are, our identity, stops when the physical body stops. Science, especially, will tell you that consciousness is a byproduct of electrical things happening in the brain, and just so happens to be there. And when the brain is no longer there, consciousness, therefore, is no longer there either. Yet, in the same mouthful, they'll tell you energy can't be created or destroyed. It just changes form. Make up your mind. Which one is it going to be, guys? What you're going to find is we do simply change form as consciousness. And once you fully really know what this means, you'll begin to realize that you don't die when you die, even if your body does die, which isn't the ideal way to get out of here, but that seems to be the easiest way to get out these days. But even if your body dies, your consciousess, you still wake up on the other side. This is not a theory. I had a near-death experience when I was 18 years old, and one of the things that depressed me most was when my body died, I realized it. It was way down below me, and I knew it was dead. And I was still thinking. I didn't want to be here anymore because I was very sad to begin with, and I was still sad when I got over the other side. So, wait a minute, I just want to go to sleep. I'm supposed to be dead. Can I be dead? And I heard a voice. It was like my own higher self saying, "You can play dead if you want to." It's like, all right, something's wrong with this picture. They tell you when you die you're going to be dead. And, well, I know it's dead down there, and I could feel this cord of energy disconnecting from the body. And this awareness started to come to me. My higher self, my own higher identity, was communicating with me and saying, you have a choice now. You got out this far to where you can start to understand what your life's about and who you were and all that things. Do you want to go back? You could go back and you could teach this stuff. And I said, well, I didn't like it back there. I really like it here. I can think clear. There was a clearness, a clarity that came to me. And the first urge was, leave it dead. Thank you. I'll go on. What's next? But then there was a sense of responsibility and a realization of something profound that came to me. God, so many people down there are scared to death of dying. They think it's a horrible, bad thing, and they'll do anything to stop it from happening. Why? It's nice over here. It's nicer on the other side. At least if I could go back and share that much. Well, I ended up sharing a lot more than that, but that was the beginning of understanding through personal experience that there is life beyond the body here. One of the first things I learned was once you have a near-death experience, it opens up your 5th DNA strand template and a bit of your 4th, which means the consciousness from D5, which is part of your soul, and D4, your astral consciousness, make a link, and they come back into body with you. So you still have an open conduit. This was one of the reasons on the higher levels my own identity had allowed a near-death experience to take place, so I could get more of myself into my body faster, so I could wake up here more quickly, so I could do the job that I had commissioned to do before I even came, that I didn't remember because my DNA had shut down. Every one of you have a part of yourself that knows exactly why you came here, exactly what your history is, where you were before, what you were part of, what you were doing. You don't have to have a near-death experience to begin to bring that part of your awareness back into body. And believe me, once you start to realize why you're here, it changes everything. First of all, you start to realize there's no such thing as an unimportant person. There is no such thing as somebody who is worthless. There is no such thing as somebody who doesn't fit or doesn't belong. And there is no such thing as a sinner. All right. Now this is a big one, the sinner concept. There's a book that used to be a nice book once upon a time, before the Council of Nicaea got a hold of it in 325 AD on behalf of the Roman Empire and changed some books around. Once upon a time, the book that we call the Bible now was about 20 times bigger than it is, and the word sinner wasn't used once. We were not ever looked on by God as lowly, pathetic, bad creatures that could be manipulated by guilt to hopefully get back into God's favor. Why? So we wouldn't have to feel so miserable all the time down here. So maybe we could have what we needed. So maybe we didn't have to be afraid of death. There are teachings, the teachings that we're beginning to bring back here. The Kathara teachings were part of biblical texts. See, the Bible, what became the Bible, was part of a much larger series of books called the Mahabharata books. They are the teachings of the inner Christ. They are the teachings that Jesus taught. They were the teachings that John the Baptist and Miriam taught, that the Essenes taught 2,000 years ago. They were the teachings that, after that, the Cathari of southern France taught and were killed for it in 1244 AD when they were exterminated by, again, the Church of Rome, I believe, the Roman Catholic Church. There have been pieces of these books and the information contained within them preserved mostly in verbal tradition since they were last given in physical text, which was in the time of Jeshua, or Jesus, 2,000 years ago. Actually, 10 AD is when they were translated into writing. Jeshua was born in 12 BC, and by 10 AD, he and the people around him began the translations on the Mahabharata texts. The Mahabharata texts are part of a larger, huge body of information called the Emerald Covenant CDD plates, Cloister Doratura plates. They're ancient holographic discs that were given to this race in 246,000 BC, I believe. Yes, our race is that old and older. They were the original founders' race records of who we were, why we were put here, what our commission was, how science worked, how spirit works, how stargates work, how ascension works, and how to have a good time while you're in 3D. Because God wanted us to have a good time, because God's a loving God, not a wrathful God. The Mahabharata teachings, which were the teachings that pertain specifically to the inner Christ, which is the inner Templar, the energy systems and consciousness and spirit systems that run the body hologram, they also had teachings of the Templar, what we're beginning the teachings of next weekend, where you're dealing with the body's anatomy, the body of the Earth's anatomy. The systems we'll learn about this weekend, about our subtle body anatomy, also pertain exactly and directly to the planet, to a galaxy, and to universes. It is the core template structure that the universe was built on, and every microcosmic aspect of the universe follows that same template pattern. It is the pattern by which energy from source circulates through the 15-dimensional system and individuates itself into all sorts of manifestations. These teachings, the teachings of the Mahabharata, the inner Christos, the inner Templar, were the teachings of the Law of One. The Law of One refers to a body of teachings that told us about our relationship to Source, where Source is a collective, intelligent consciousness, eternal, limitless, boundless, that chose, in order to understand itself better, to create a framework of reality where a hologram of three-dimensional manifestation could take place. So Source first turned itself into the hologram, the structures, dimensions, and time matrices, and energy body structures, and then Source continued to individuate itself, and it created suns and planets, stars, galaxies, and it continued to individuate itself, and it created life forms to live on those planets and stars and galaxies. The Law of One teaches us that each and every one of us are a manifestation, a direct face and manifestation of the consciousness of God. Where is God? There comes a time when you really understand the breadth of the Mahabharata teachings, where you don't have a weird reaction to the statement of someone saying, I am God. It doesn't mean, I'm God and I'm your boss. I get to boss over you because I'm God and you're not. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean, I'm the creator of the universe, and therefore I know everything, and I can be arrogant about it and obnoxious. That's showing how much you don't think you're God, because ego doesn't fit into that consciousness. When you can say, I am God, you are acknowledging the fact that a piece of source individualized itself as you. And you'll also recognize at the same time that every other being is also a piece of source, individualized. Source is learning to know itself progressively, eternally, through manifesting itself in a multitude of forms. These are the teachings that Jesus taught. These are the teachings that the Essenes traveled from place to teach and got hunted by all sorts of people because of it. We have been taught in our cultures a gross twist and distortion of our relationship to God. We've been taught God is way out there someplace, and we're way down here someplace, and there's this big space in between the two. We have been taught that, not because they were the original teachings from Source, not because they were even the original teachings from Jesus. We were taught that because certain people, let's refer to them right now as the Illuminati Collective, who are in places of power since the Atlantean period, which technically ended in 9558 BC, they decided they'd like to run the world. They decided they would like to take over this planet and its stargates. And they decided the way to do that was to hijack the consciousness of the other life forms that lived here. And they knew Templar mechanics, so they knew how to do it. Templar mechanics, the inner Christos teachings, they were used and twisted in a way that created an ability by certain Illuminati forces. They call themselves Illuminati because they were illuminated, and it was a very arrogant way of looking at it. They had the technical teachings left, but what they lost contact with was the law of one. What they lost contact with was the feeling of source within them, to where they could never hurt another life form because they knew it was only the self, because there was only one self. That was the God self, and that is all. The Illuminati races had the first distortions in genetic code on this planet. Their distortion in genetic code created within their consciousness a reciprocal distortion, where they began to make a division in their own understanding between God, themselves, and other people, to the point where they could inflict harm on other people and justify it by scientific teachings without having any conscience or recognition that the people they were harming were another face, another aspect of themselves, because all were God. These teachings that once upon a time gave us freedom and the absolute free will joy to create, co-create with Source, the collective of what Source is. We were given those teachings for a joyful creation here. But they were taken and they were twisted into a control dogma. That control dogma took numerous types of forms. The first forms after Atlantis that came up through Sumerian culture, where we got stories of things like the god Marduk and these kind of things. We got creator god stories, God's Jehovah, God's Marduk, all sorts of gods. We had godlets running around all over the place in the old Sumerian days. And then we had the Egyptian period, where even more gods came into the scene, and all of a sudden, gods weren't the living presence of spirit within you. Gods became things out there and beings who said, I'm your God. In other words, I'm your bully. We lost touch with the teachings that allowed the force and consciousness and cognition of being God to move through us. The teachings took us from saying, no, that's not right. This is God. You have to worship this out here, outside of yourself. Now, that couldn't have been done to us if the planetary grid distortions hadn't taken place. If that hadn't happened, if the things to the planetary grids hadn't happened and our DNA was functioning the way it was designed to function, nobody could have done that to us. Nobody could have told us a lie about the relationship to God, because we were a living embodiment of that knowing. But when our DNA became distorted, when our DNA templates became distorted, because the planetary grids became distorted, we lost the conscious awareness while we were in our 3D bodies of what our relationship to Source was. And it was very frightening, because we were an avatar race that was used to knowing that God was always with us and a part of us, and we were a part of God. We had our memory banks wiped. And there were several instances won't get into it in this workshop, but in the Templar workshop, we'll touch on a few moments in history that actually survived in the records in the Bible, like the Tower of Babel. We call that the Babylon Massacre, because we've been babbling ever since. Because what happened in the Babylon Massacre, and I believe that was 3470 BC, that's when a major acceleration in the grid damage was done to the planet, and it totally knocked our memory banks, our race memory banks, out of whack, and it totally messed up our DNA, creating that base 4 distortion in the chemical DNA that I told you about. We'll talk a little bit at the end of this workshop with some of the new material that's just being added to Cathara right now about the translation between DNA template and chemical DNA, and we'll begin to understand that when I'm talking about DNA and DNA templates and subtle bodies, this goes right down into how many chromosomes you have in your body and what's in each of those chromosomes. It goes right down into what science identifies as the sequence of chemicals that make up one gene, and then how many genes go together to make up the gene code. All of these things have been directly affected and mutated, deviated from the original pattern, because of a series of events that took place that progressively amplified the distortions in the planetary grids. So it's interesting. I like to start the teachings of the Maharata teachings, because the Maharata teachings are about the inner Christos. And the most important part that's going to be for you at first is, what does that mean to me personally? Okay? How do I get that waking up in my body? How do I get my consciousness here? How do I learn more and grow to become what I am? And how do I remember what I am? Because I don't even remember here. If I remembered what I am, I might understand why I came here. You know? After we get to that point where we start to work with technologies, because these are technologies, they're technologies of directing energy through your mental body directly into very specific systems in your body that if you don't know what the systems are, you're not going to know how to direct them. But you're going to take these technologies, use them to begin the process of waking yourself up. And then, as you wake up, if you want to, and you can grow at your own rate, but those of you who are ready to take the Templar course next weekend, we will get into what's called the forbidden history. The history books of this planet were not destroyed. They were just hidden. They have been hidden since 9558 BC especially, which was a period of time that in the Bible became the Great Flood. It was a flood that was done on purpose, and it wasn't planetary, but it was a great house cleaning of all the historical records, including many, many of the archaeological finds that would have otherwise already been discovered. There was a house cleaning done on this planet, and records were hidden. They were hidden, and some of them were taken off planet. We'll find out what our drama is today, what we're seeing. When we watch TV right now, it's getting really interesting out there in the drama. We just had the trade centers blow up in America at the hands of a terrorist. What does that have to do with subtle body anatomy? Everything. Our political dramas that we're moving into in the world. Political dramas that are going to affect each one of us, whether you live in the States or Canada or Afghanistan. All of these political dramas and the surface propaganda that we're being given have to do with some very real events that are taking place behind the scenes, that have to do with the planetary Templar complex, that have to do with the fact that for the first time since the Atlantean period, and the first time fully in over 200,000 years, the stargates are opening, and it has been known for thousands and thousands of years by the groups called the Illuminati that this would happen in this period of time, because stargates open on cycles. They open for a while, and sometimes you can keep them open if your planetary Templar is working right, but other times you can't sustain them open all the time, and they close again. But then they're due to open at another point in a fixed cycle. So literally, the ancient races here knew that in this time period, between the year 2000 and 2012, stargates were going to open. Now, we're at a point of mass disillusionment on this planet, to the point where we don't even remember stargates existed. We were supposed to be the guardians of those stargates, the ones that protected them from other races of beings who had genetic problems and consciousness problems, who would try to get control of them and cause harm here. Right now, the dramas we are watching unfold, and they're not going to go away, they're going to escalate between now and 2008 in the political arena. These dramas have to do with Stargate Quest. And that's not something you're going to hear on the news, not for a long time anyway. We're in the middle of a massive drama that goes back into the Atlantean period that we'll talk about in the Templar course. But before we worry about the mass drama, we need to understand the solutions that have to do with our personal dramas as we sit in our own little lives and try to figure out, what do I do with myself? I have feelings and things I might like to do or experience, but most of us don't even know what it means to be here or why we're here. We just kind of like amuse ourselves with trying to follow things that feel good. We go on the pleasure-pain principle. We move away from things that don't feel good and we move toward things that do feel good. And if we do that for most of our life, we get to the point where we're 80 or 90 years old and we don't move much because our bodies are falling apart. And we sit there and remember all of the good things as much as possible. Or we go into the negative and remember all the bad things. And then we sit there in our bodies that don't move very well anymore, and this big ominous fear sits with us. My body's dying. Oh my God. What does that mean? That's when people like really get out the Bible and say, is your name Jehovah? Whatever your name is, please. Hi, I'm here. Sorry I didn't talk to you all my life, but I'm really ready now. I'm really, really sorry if I was bad. That's where we start to say, okay, maybe I was a sinner. Well, how do you get over that? Okay, that's atonement, right? Okay, what page did you look that up on? Okay, atonement. Hello. Because we're terrified of, oh my God, what if we die and there is a God? And if there is a God, and we didn't do what was said in the Bible or whatever holy book we're following, does that mean God's going to be really mad and do something awful to us? Or if I'm afraid of that so much that I'm going to just go the science way, I'm going to accept the fact that my consciousness is going to be annihilated when my body dies. So you sit there and wait to be annihilated. Real fun. I have children in this world, and so does Az. And think of the things that if we were raising them in the regular belief systems that are here, how depressing it is to tell your kids, oh, hey Mom, what's life about? Well, what does it mean when you're 20? And what does it mean when you're 30? Well, when you're 20, you still feel like it's worth it. When you're 30, you still hope it is, but you didn't get half as far as you wanted to. By the time you're 35, you start to feel the tug of the gene code where you get really tired. And it's all a lot harder to do what you were doing at 20, and it was easy, but you still have hope. By the time you're 40, you're in rebellion, and you want to go through a second childhood or adolescence because the whole thing that you tried to do didn't work out very well. So you go into wish fulfillment. Then by the time you're 50, you got too tired from your second childhood and decide that you better make peace with yourself, so it's a good time to get spiritual. So there's this whole process of things that we can mark our lives with in 10-year increments that have to do with dealing with the fact that we don't know what we're here for, we don't know what to do with ourselves while we're here, and we're terrified of what it means to be anyplace else because we might not be at all. When you have to look at your kids and realize this is what you need to tell them if you're going to do the mainstream thing, it's worth finding a better option, even if it makes you sound weird compared to the neighbors. Yeah. My daughter is really funny. She's 9 years old, and she talks to me about things. She'll come in and say, Mom, I can't sleep. My DNA is activating again. And I look at her and I just smile, because once upon a time in the ancient of days, all kids spoke like that. They knew. They knew when things were happening in their bodies and their DNA. They knew. They were taught since the time they were very small about where their chakras were located and about what this type of sensation meant, what that meant. They knew who they were. They knew why they were here, and they knew what to watch for and what to do with their energy system. So I'm watching my daughter, who sounds like an absolute nut compared to the other kids in the neighborhood, right? Only to their parents. She makes perfect sense in our house. But I watch her and I look at the hope that's being brought back here. A new generation of children now are going to be raised with the knowledge of what it means to have chakras and what it means to have subtle bodies and what it means to be a spirit using the vehicle of flesh to express yourself. It's also going to raise a generation of rebels who are going to look at the old system, say, excuse me, I don't think so. I come from a very big love space, and I don't have to fight with you, but I don't have to buy your nonsense either. And they're going to find a way, because we're beginning to have the teachings brought back to us, where we can all find a way of reharnessing the power that was our birthright from the beginning, which is the power of manifestation. Before we can reclaim our power of manifestation, we need to reclaim the vessel through which manifestation takes place. And that means we need to heal our bodies, our DNA templates, because through that healing, we will get the rest of ourselves back in and remember all the wonderful knowledge we forgot. once you start remembering, you won't need a speaker to tell you stuff. You'll realize you can access it directly through your own consciousness. Michael and I are speakers. Azertania and I call them. I oscillate between the two, Michael and Azertania. They're both his name. We're speakers, which means we have a job that we commissioned to do when we came in here as souls, as part of a team, part of the Indigo team, Team Indigo. We came in to help bring back the ancient teachings. But the teachings don't belong to us. They belong to all of you. They belong to everybody in this universe. We simply trained in a way that we could, on a planet with as much distortion in the grids as this one has. There were certain specialties of training that we needed to go through in order to understand how to get ourselves in a body, clear enough of the mess out of the gene code so we could then bring in the information and translate it in verbal form. But the information exists, and now the frequencies are becoming available on the planet. So even if there weren't speakers putting it in books for you to learn, if you knew just a little bit, if you knew that you have an avatar consciousness that lives right with you, and that there are things you can do to begin opening that knowledge, you would be able to begin accessing this data on your own. Now, the service that we do for people right now is to help them remember that. Because right now, if we didn't tell people this, people would still be having little choice other than believing what we've been told for thousands of years, which is we're pathetic, we're sinners, we die when our body dies, all this stuff, all this nonsense. If you don't know you have an avatar consciousness level, you're not going to be interested in looking for it, because you're not going to know it's there. Tonight we're going to go through, I'm hoping to get through chapter 1 tonight, all right, which is going to take us into something called context. Before it's going to matter much to learn how to identify your body parts, your subtle body parts, and identify currents that you're running through your body for healing, it will help a lot if you know the structure or the context within which your body exists. Where do these currents come from? What is the structure of multidimensional reality? This isn't a theory. There is a structure. There is a primal order to the way the universe was created. Our universe is created in a way that allows systems of three-dimensional holograms to be perceptually experienced by consciousness that focuses itself within those systems. Even our body is part of the hologram. So we're going to learn first the context of healing, which is the system of multidimensional reality, primal order, what it's made out of. We're going to learn a bit about what a dimension is. Like, what is a dimension? Science has one definition. We consider, I think science now kind of uses the word dimension as a characteristic of, like an adjective of something. When we use the word dimension, we're using it as a noun, person, place, or thing. It is a thing. It is not a characteristic of a something else. It is a thing unto itself. So tonight, before we leave, I'm going to try to get you through at least halfway through chapter 1, if not all the way through. I'm not ready for that yet. Thank you. Okay. The fun part, this is like the work part, right? The fun part of learning these things is not learning about dimensions and primal structure, all right? This is the hard work part. What was a dimension? What's a Partakai unit? What is a flash line sequence? Oh, Lord, new words, right? Lots of them. This is the part that is one of the most difficult parts to learn in the whole book. But in the book, in the Kathara Manual, you have intricate explanations of what we're talking about. What I'm talking about here, that if I were to try to take this book, this manual, one page at a time, we'd have to just schedule like a year-long retreat and take, like 1 page a day to go over everything it means. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a shorthand version and try to bring into focus what the words in the texts are referring to. But things that you might move too fast, and we talked about it, but you don't remember what it was, the stuff is going to be in the writing, so you can look for it. But we're going to learn some new words. We're going to learn a new interpretation of the word dimension. We're going to learn some words called Partakai, and Partakam, which are units of consciousness, the basic building blocks of all matter and manifestation. We're going to learn how they form together to create something called Partakai grids, and Partakai grids build up to form what becomes Kathara grids, what becomes primal order blueprints and templates. And on those templates are what all structure manifests upon. So once we learn some of the basic harder stuff, just getting oriented to the context, it's the context of living, which is also the context of healing. If you're going to heal, you need to know what part needs healing. And to understand what parts need healing in the human race and in your own personal body, you need to understand those subtle parts that go right into context. If you don't understand dimensional structure, you're not going to be very good at deciding which primal life force currents you're going to pull if you want to do hands-on healing. I kind of look at some of these other healing systems that are out there, and a part of me chuckles because they take themselves very seriously, some of them. Some of them charge $10,000 for a master's level certification. I won't mention any names. But interestingly, they don't know yet 15-dimensional structure. So they couldn't tell you a triadic phase current from a D3 current. They don't have the context. They will give you processes you can use to play with energy, but they don't yet understand because their teachers didn't understand what the context of this healing. They didn't have primal order structure. The reason they didn't have it was because these records were not released on the planet until February of 2000 was when there was a certain security release of data from what I talked about before, the Emerald Covenant Cloister Doratura plates, the ancient records that are held in holographic form. There's actually discs that hold these records. Translation was allowed for the first time since the Atlantean period on this information, on primal order structure, on primal substance, which are Partakai units. This information is being brought back now. So all of those other healing systems that people have been using, holistic healing systems, you don't throw them out. You simply show the context they fit in, because if they would combine what they're doing with Kathara healing, they would be able to increase hugely the positive effects of healing that can be gained through those systems. So what's nice about the Kathara system, it doesn't mean if you took this one or that one or Reiki or something like that, you throw out your books and just say it was no good. No, you learn to take the best from what you were taught before. You also become familiar with the context of healing and the context of reality enough to where you can start to say what's the good stuff and what stuff's nonsense, so you can throw the nonsense out, but you keep the good stuff and you use it and integrate it into the Kathara program. Now, you can do healing without Kathara, but good luck to you, because you're using lower dimensional currents unless you know your Kathara grid, unless you know how to open D12 current. This is what Kathara Level 1 is built on, learning to run what's called the Maharata ray. That is the D12 hydroplasmic liquid light ray of the 12th dimensional frequency bands. It's also called the Christos frequency, because it begins the relationship to the unified field of liquid light. It is the stage called pre-matter. Before things come into manifest dense form, they go from being no form whatsoever into antimatter, which is like a gaseous light form. Then they solidify into liquid light form. The liquid light form of D12 is the pre-matter template. That is the divine blueprint template, because from there, from that universal field of liquid light, form differentiation begins to happen. That's where consciousness takes the form of a star, a planet, a galaxy, or a person, or an ant, or a tree. That's where your original mathematical program that holds the imprint for your body and for your consciousness coming into density is located. So what we're going to do in Kathara 1 is learn how to open up D12 current, the liquid light pre-matter current, which is the Christos ray. Some people call it the platinum ray because it's pale silver white when you see it with the etheric vision. This is the beginning of resetting the mathematical program of your divine blueprint back into your Kathara system, your template, to wake up your divine blueprint again. This is the only way a being can generate enough frequency to override the genetic distortion that's been keeping us imprisoned in mortal bodies for so long. Without the D12 frequency, which has the ability to pull together all of the other frequencies below it, dimensions 1 through 11, it can pull those frequencies together and reset them to their original natural dimensional pattern, their mathematical coding. So if there's any distortions in the lower dimensional fields, the D12 frequency has the power to override it and set it back to its original imprint. The original imprint is what Source had decided was going to be the manifestation, and then it projected its energy into the creation framework, which is called the time matrix, which we'll learn about in context. From Source projecting its intention, what you were supposed to be, what you, when you were still a part of Source, wanted to be, why you came here. It set that impression, that original intention, in the D12 fields. It's located in liquid light. It's still an imprint. Now, because we've had distortions in the lower dimensional fields, we have not been able to express through the divine blueprint. That wouldn't happen on a planet that had the ability to naturally run D12 frequency. All planets start out with that ability. But there was grid damage done to this planet in 208,216 BC, long time ago. Those grid distortions made it so the planetary energy systems, which are called axiotonal lines, the Cathara grid of the planet, could only anchor 10 dimensions of frequency. It blocked out dimensions 11 and 12 frequency from the planetary grids, which meant anything on this planet could no longer run D12 frequency, so it could not fully access the original divine blueprint pattern. And once that direct connection in energy to the divine blueprint, between the manifestation and the divine blueprint, once that connection was severed, deterioration started to happen. The divine blueprint began to deviate in the lower dimensional fields, and you couldn't bring that frequency back in to reset it. What's happened here, and the reason why these teachings are being brought back now and they weren't brought back 100 years ago, is because what I said before about stargates beginning to open. There are things happening on this planet that haven't happened in thousands and thousands of years. And one of the biggest things is there has been work done here to repair the damage that was done 200,000 years ago. For the first time in over 200,000 years, D12 frequency started running through the planetary grids on January 1st of 2000 because of all sorts of reparative work. It's called the Christos Realignment Mission on a planetary level that has been being done here. We have available now the D12 hydroplasmic frequency, which means we have access to the full mathematical coding. Our own pillar of light can send it down. We can get back into our bodies and into our DNA template and into the planet, the original divine blueprint. So when we're working with Cathara healing, we're going to learn the context so you understand dimensional structure, because that will help you to understand where you're pulling what from. You're going to understand matter density levels, first of all. What it means to be physical. What it means to be physical in the next density up, which is still physical, but it's ghost-like compared to here. There are matter density levels. If you don't understand primal substance, you're not going to understand how matter density levels happen. So this is the part. Tonight we're going to do the part where you understand the basic framework. So you understand that it's a very easy, actually, framework. It's quite simple. There's millions of complexities as far as how energy works within the structure, but the structure itself is very, very simple. You don't need to have a master's degree in physics in order to understand primal units. You don't need to have a master's degree in anything to understand there are 15 dimensions. They relate to each other in a specific way. You're here, this is here, this is here, this is here, and this is how you make your relationship to the higher energy systems. This is what we're going to learn. So we'll go through that tonight. When we come in tomorrow, that's when the fun starts. The part that I love teaching most, and I guess it's probably because of the part that I enjoy most myself, is once you learn context, okay, that's what the universe is about and I'm floating around in it. The fun part is learning where your body parts directly connect to the primal structure of the universe, where your 15-dimensional anatomy is located. It's like finding a treasure chest. Wow, I have that? I have 15 chakras, primary chakras. Yes, I do. I have a Cathara grid. Do you know where yours is? Once this information was given back and I could play with it on a conscious level, I remember thinking, I wish I could retire right now, because I'd like to spend the next maybe 20 years just locked up in a nice little comfortable room someplace investigating. Okay, where's chakra 1? What if I take a tour with my consciousness through chakra 1? You will find, when you know these energy body systems, you will realize something. You have the ability to access amazing amounts of information. It's like having a new forest to explore. You've got you and your consciousness, and now you know at least a roadmap of where you can begin taking yourself. If you want to look at D1, the first dimensional frequencies, and see what's going on there, you'd use chakra 1. If you want to explore D5, which is out of the three-dimensional system, you would use chakra 5. You start to realize You don't need to entertain yourself with outside stuff. Once you start to open your mind inside and realize what you are and what you're a part of, you can entertain yourself from now until eternity. Teach yourself all sorts of things. It's like the best cable network you've ever seen. The internet, instead of the inner. So we all do have this inner net, the inner Templar, and once you start to play with it, and you can't really play with it until you realize where parts are. Once you know where your parts are, you can have some idea of what to do with your consciousness, where you can put your focus of attention to make it do certain things. So the fun part for me in teaching Kathara is teaching people about the body parts that you forgot you had. Because they're the body parts that also hold the stations of consciousness, that hold your soul identity, your oversoul identity, your avatar identity. These are the parts of yourself that hold huge amounts of knowledge, more knowledge than you could hold in a body here on the planet right now. This is why, when you begin to learn these things, if you really understand that these are the structures that Source created, this is not a theory that science came up with by trying to assume certain things by looking at fossils. This is a structure that has been here for over 500 million years on this planet. These records are that old. There was another copy of them given in 246,000 BC. That was not the first copy. These are the ancient original Founders' teachings. Once you realize that you have access to this huge living matrix of knowledge, you'll also realize that there's not another person or thing on this planet that you have a right to pass hateful judgment against, no matter how bad they might act. It just shows you how far they have forgotten what they're a part of. You will learn that all the nonsense you might have been taught when you were young, you're worthless, you're not good enough, you'll never be good enough, all this stuff that so many of us have heard because our parents heard it from their parents and they passed it down. First of all, that stuff begins to heal. You start to realize there's no such thing as being a worthless person. There's no such thing as being not good enough. And when you start to realize that healing in yourself, you begin to change the way you look at other people automatically. You find compassion. You start to see behind what's causing them to be as they are, even if being as they are is not particularly nice at the moment. You begin to find what's called Christ consciousness. There's a lot of lip service to Christ consciousness happening in the New Age movement right now. I've met some amazing people who will arrogantly, clue number one that they're not here, arrogantly say, my 12 strands are activated. My 12-strand DNA is activated. I'm an avatar now. And it's like, yeah? Oh, good. Can you give me like a lesson in levitation? And they look at you and blink. Well, what does that mean? What do you mean, what does it mean? You're in Christ consciousness. You're an avatar, right? You have 12 strands activated. With 12 strands activated, you can levitate. You can appear and disappear at will. All right? Then they get mad. They get mad at me. Well, fine. And I have a lot of them do like this thing. In the name of Archangel Michael, I ban you from my life, right? Because I challenge their belief system. The flaming blue sword of Michael. And I was like, hey, excuse me, I only, asked you to put the proof where your mouth is, that's all. And the only reason I do that to somebody is if they're displaying arrogance about it. Because if somebody's telling me out of one side of their mouth that they're in Christ consciousness, and out of the other side of their mouth they're patting themselves on the back and puffing their chest up and thinking how great they are compared to lowly little you, it's showing you they're not there. There's a lot of lip service going on in the New Age movement. And by the time you get done with this course, you'll be able to spot some of it. For those of you hardy souls who are also coming to the Templar course, you'll be able to spot a lot more. Okay? Because in the Templar course at this point, we're naming names of who's teaching what. And we're letting people know what ascension teachings are part of the original Founders' teachings and what ones are not. And what ones are meant to trick you into using your energy in ways that's not good for you or the planet. But it stays pretty benign in Kathara healing. In Kathara healing, we deal with learning to be empowered again by getting back our consciousness, getting back an awareness of our body parts and how to use our mind to direct energy. One of the real interesting transitions I've found is, okay, once you know all this stuff, it's like a bicycle. You can learn how to ride it, right? And then you leave it parked against the side of the house and you keep walking to town every day. And you're saying, yeah, the bike's still there. I could ride it. Same thing here. If you can learn this stuff, but if you don't use it, we're taught here to use our consciousness in only a 3D way. So we look for the 3D solutions first. Once you learn Kathara healing, and you're having an issue come up in your life, or a healing issue come up in your life, instead of letting the autopilot kick in, where you just go run to the doctor and you put your book away and you're not even going to run any technique because you don't feel good. If you run the technique, it'll help you feel better. You have to get on the bicycle and ride it. So you can learn how to ride a bike. You can learn how to do Kathara healing. But the results, if you're going to find results, personal results, they're not going to come from parking the book on your shelf. They're going to come from getting to the point where you don't even need the book because you've integrated it, where you've learned how to do the techniques. See, it's the techniques. You can learn everything you want to around it, which is helping your mental body to expand so it can hold the frequency that you're trying to bring through. This is why we teach in detail, because your mental body is very important. It needs to know, or it will block out the rest of the frequencies coming in. So you'll learn your stuff, but then you apply it. The change comes with repetition of using the technologies, which are simple exercises, some not so simple, they have lots of steps. What's nice about Kathara healing too is what starts out in the beginning, it's going to take you quite a few steps, and it's a pain in the neck to have to do it, frequently. Where, I even get like that, oh no, not my Maharic Seal again, that kind of stuff. However, if I want D12 frequency running through my body, I know I need to run my Maharic Seal. But the more you work with the techniques, the more shortcuts will come up, where you don't have to run a 26-step technique. You can get the same thing accomplished in 4. But you need to start with the long version to build the frequency, to get that imprint back in to your active template so it can be sent through the DNA. It's building critical mass. So that's why the stuff that starts out has quite a few steps to it. Eventually, after you get done with Kathara 1, you'll find that we've moved, since Kathara was given, we've moved into what's called a Maharic Quick Seal, where you literally can do what takes 26 steps in the beginning in like an instant, running a Maharic Seal. We'll talk about Maharic Seal as we get into more of the body of Kathara. But I want you to know in the beginning, so you don't get disheartened by saying, oh my God, 26 steps, I fall asleep on step 14. If you keep working with it, you'll get past step 14, and you'll find that you don't fall asleep until step 24. And then eventually you'll find, as your DNA activates to hold those frequencies, you actually make it all the way through the exercise. Then, the more you use it, you'll find your body takes over and does them. You'll be visualizing something, and all of a sudden you jump 4 steps ahead. And just keep up with yourself, because your body's integrated the technique that you've taught it. So it will teach you shortcuts and how to do it faster so you can get the same frequency running without having to go through all the steps. So instead of getting disheartened looking at 26 steps and saying, I can't do this for the rest of my life, you don't have to do this for the rest of your life. It's the beginning with any of these techniques. Once they're set into the body manually and energized, it's like watering a garden. Once you water them in the DNA template enough, eventually they will take hold and start to sprout on their own, where these frequencies will become a natural, awake part in your body. It's almost like having a part of you that really wants to come into body, but it keeps falling asleep on the job, and you have to use the manual techniques to keep waking and say, yo, you're coming down here, you're coming in my body. We're going to be one. Come on, soul, come into the body. When you work with it that way, eventually it stays awake. What you're doing is getting your DNA template to behave differently than it has since you were born, to behave differently than it has in your last 20 incarnations. So it takes a bit of time. If the planetary grids were perfect right now, and they were perfectly in their own divine blueprint, which they're not, they just started to be able to run D12 frequency back in. There's a lot of repair. If they were in good shape, we wouldn't have to spend so much time learning how to do these techniques. We'd do them once or twice and they'd stick, because the planetary grids themselves would help support that pattern in the body. But right now what we're doing is we are actually resisting the planetary grids, because the planetary grids are still trying to send their distortions into the body. So whatever work you just did, in 12 hours, the planetary grids are going to hit a critical mass of energy in your body again and flip it back over to its mutated pattern, because the mutations are still in the planetary grids. It takes a lot longer time to completely clear a planetary grid than it does to clear your own body grid. So as long as you take responsibility to manually reset in your body the divine blueprint, you not only will be able to sustain more and more levels of DNA activation and DNA repair and getting more of your consciousness in body, but you'll progressively help the planet to heal its grids faster. Because just as the planet sends us energy into our bodies, we send energy back into the planet. Right now, we've been making each other sick for 25,000 years. If we begin these processes of healing the DNA, we will heal what we send back into the planetary grids. And each one of us is like a walking piece of the planet. If we get ourselves healed to a higher level, that piece of the planet becomes healed, which means the planet becomes more able to sustain healing for the whole race. So it's like a love affair between person and planet, where you realize you are an energy system, a spirit that is an energy system that has the ability, by the choices you make right now and each day, to directly affect the outcome of the whole. You can change a piece of the world, and you start with you. So there's a huge amount of growth that we can all get by working with the concepts and the teachings of the Kathara. They're sacred teachings, because you look at the word sacred and you think of, okay, well, sacred, that's the stuff like that religions teach you about, right? Or they're supposed to anyway. What does the Bible call sacred? What does the Koran call sacred? What do, Buddha traditions call sacred? Everybody has a different interpretation of sacred. What none of them tend to do, though, is they teach you about sacred, but not many of them. The Easterns do a little bit better. Teach you how to get sacred into the body as a reality. These teachings are very sacred, because they are the teachings that all of the original sacred teachings were built on and edited from. So we're in the middle of a renaissance of consciousness, where we're moving toward one of two things, and it depends completely on the choices we make as to what we want to learn and what we don't want to learn. We are either moving into a genuine New Age of enlightenment, more enlightenment than has been here in thousands and thousands of years, or we are moving toward a new Dark Ages, where we buy into a bunch of nonsense that's being put out right now, propaganda, false ascension mechanics, New Age mumbo-jumbo that has twists in it, traditional mumbo-jumbo that was edited so long ago nobody remembers what the original was. If we have the courage to be open to learning the new information that's coming, that it's really the old information being brought back, and have the courage to say, well, the Bible, the guy I always taught was a holy book and a good book, but it turns out, wow, the Council of Nicaea took out, a good 90% of it. Gee, what was in those other teachings? You begin to look at the difference between the letter of the law as it's been fed to you in your culture and the spirit of the law, of what it was trying to tell you originally, before it was passed down through the hands of men so long, men, women, not being sexist here, to the point where the original truth and the spirit of it got lost. I have faith in people on this planet. When you show them, particularly with Kathara, the structure, how simple it actually is to reclaim. There's not a whole lot of mumbo-jumbo. You don't have to read like 200 million volumes of some Eastern text that's being hidden by the Tibetans, It's really not that hard. Once you realize this, anybody, most people with common sense will say, yeah, really, that makes sense. That feels right. Because there's a part of each of us that remembers. There's a part of each of us that remembers right now, that's in the higher dimensional fields, that knows we're at one with Source. So this will resonate with the part deep inside, but there may be a lot of programs that sit over that part. If we've been raised strict Christian or strict Muslim or strict anything else, we're going to have to make a choice between dogma and new information. Did God die and doesn't talk to people anymore? This is how they treat those books. Once upon a time, God wrote books. Did he come down with a pen? No. He talked to people in their heads, and they wrote it down. Where'd the Bible come from? People don't ask the right questions in this society because they're not taught to. You go to a Christian church and you ask, well, okay, where'd the Bible come from? God wrote it. Okay. When? Well, they don't know either. They mean well. They're after the Spirit. But they get so stuck on just the book, and they don't realize the book has been manipulated, and it's not just the Bible. Every religious text on this planet has been toyed with, messed with, and edited. So if we have the courage to move past dogma and into a natural curiosity of, okay, if there's more to it than that, what is it? And you start to apply that with these type of things that you can learn about your direct connection, you will grow. You'll grow probably so rapidly that your neighbors or your church group might think you're nuts, or they might tell you you're possessed by the devil. You know, people, there's some groups of people that are more attached to their dogma than they are to God. And that's sad, because the dogma, the religion, stands between them and God instead of being the vessel through which they can get into a relationship with God. You may find people like that get very judgmental. You know, I've had Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door, bless them. And I always like, you know, I don't discriminate against anybody. And they come and they say, oh, can we talk to you? And it's like, yeah, I know you want to convert me to being a Jehovah's Witness. Oh, no, we don't convert anybody. We just share our truth. Okay. You know, so it'd be nice. I let them come in. And because I figure, well, fair is fair, and you're going to share your truth, and that means I can share my truth with you too, right? Not, right? They come in. They would come into my house, very sweet people in the beginning, and and we'd have wonderful conversations about the nature of God and God being a loving God and all sorts of things, and we agreed wonderfully. And then they would come back to, do you call your God Jehovah? I said, well, I understand that a lot of people need to do that, but I don't need to call my God Jehovah to know that my God is with me in there. And immediately they turn into something else. That if they were like that when they first knocked on the door, you wouldn't let them in. I said, you're evil. You're possessed by Satan. You know, they turn into like these judgmental, mean people. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. You know, I invited you in my house because you wanted to talk to me. You're drinking my tea. You're sitting in my kitchen, and now you're calling me evil and calling me names. I think you can leave now. I mean, you may find as you grow spiritually and start to throw out some of the trash that you feel you don't need. I'm not going to tell you what you need and what you don't need. But as you grow to understand your relationship with Source and it expands in you, it'll start to edit itself. You'll start to tell yourself, I don't need that. That was an old belief. You know, I see where that doesn't work. You know, you'll get rid of stuff. But people who aren't ready to get rid of stuff yet, especially if they're close to you, will try to nail you down. It's like you're trying to fly and they're trying to nail your feet to the ground. And you will find this. Sometimes it will bring you pain. Sometimes the growth experience is painful because you will find yourself growing at a rate that is so much faster than the other people around you. And you will realize you've learned enough through yourself that you can never go back to looking at things the way they did. Once upon a time you might have shared those beliefs, so you understand where they were, but once you get beyond them, you can never go back. Once you start to open the living Spirit of God inside of you and feel it through your own energy systems, and feel you're at oneness with Source, and realize God's not passing judgment on you. If anybody's going to judge you, it's only you. You can realize that you don't need those beliefs anymore, but if other people don't realize it, you will get tests. You will give yourself tests in your outer world to determine whether or not you've really integrated that teaching. Do you really believe that Spirit's alive in you and you can feel it and you really don't need that Bible anymore? You may have a whole year of people pumping Bible in your face on every dogma angle you can imagine, calling you names, making you feel bad. And the worst is when the universe sends to you someone who appears to have the same ideas, of the opposite gender perhaps, where you just feel, my perfect companion, we understand each other perfectly. And then all of a sudden you start to find, oh yeah, there's that Christian slant happening, and Christian's good, I'm a Christian. These teachings are Christian. These are Christian teachings because they're the original Essene Christian teachings. But you'll find dogma seeping in. And some of the ultimate tests that we put ourselves through are what means more to us. Our power and relationship and love that we have through Source, or trying to fill that gap by external relationship. And many times we'll be challenged with, are we willing to walk away from everything? It might be money, it might be houses, it might be people. Sometimes it might even be children. What means more to you? Your relationship with something out here in the hologram, or your relationship to God, is what the test comes down to. The funny thing is, I'll tell you how to solve the test from the beginning. Whatever it is, give it away. Let it go. Take Spirit first, your relationship to Spirit first, and you will get back whatever it is you thought you were losing, but in a much higher level. Yes, with interest. So, this is the beginning of a journey. It's a journey that will take you into the core of your own spirituality, but in the beginning, it'll simply take you into an anatomy course, so you can learn about what you have to play with. You have wonderful energy systems that you can learn to direct energy through that will begin to give you your creative manifestation power back. So the big heavy stuff, it's out there, you'll grow into it. we'll take it now into the things that have to do with the context and the structure. Now, before I get into getting into the content, let's say, of the manual, I want to explain a couple things about the program itself. First of all, I want to reiterate that these teachings are considered Christian teachings because they are from the original Essene Christian texts that were translated by the person who became known as Jesus Christ, whose name was Jeshua. He was known as Jeshua Melchizedek. John the Baptist and Miriam were also part of the Essene team that translated these records. So they are the pure strain Christian teachings that were originally part of the Bible text. They were originally also part of the Koran. Before that was twisted, they were originally part of the Hindu text. They were originally part of the Buddhist text. They were part of all of the sacred texts on the planet once upon a time. So the things you're going to learn about now that are kind of exciting and fun, particularly when you learn that reality is a holographic projection and take it from there. These were the original spiritual science teachings that belong to everybody. Now, the Kathara Biospiritual Healing course, Level 1, is structured in a way where we're going to be working, first of all, with the D12